5 of CXs and Os, I had a few requests to talk about the pits. No, not that one. Or that one. No, not that one either. No, we're going to get into the weeds, or more specifically, the leaves of the material post at Gavere. Before we get to that race, though, let's talk a little bit about the pits in general. In the past, the pits were the Wild West, where anything goes. Mechanics everywhere, bikes thrown left and right. It was a beautiful madhouse. And then, like everything else that once was fun, the government got involved and things started to change. Around 2004, the UCI regs were heavily modified to try and bring some control to the chaos. The pits became a Kandinsky.
Chaos, control. You like?
That's not to say that some quirks don't remain. Like the ability to be like Mariana Vos and ride backwards on the course if you miss the entrance to the pits, but haven't yet passed the exit. Of course, that rule, 5.1.039 for those scoring at home, or even those who are alone, also states that a rider, when retracing their route, must do so without obstructing other competitors. A detail Yara Castline kind of overlooked last year in Brussels. As far as what you can do once in the pit, the UCI changes that rule more than Nicole Kidman changes coats in The Undoing. Rule 5.1.038 was modified in 2004, 2010, 2014, 15, and 16. The 2014 change made the stop and go illegal after Niels Albert's BKCP team ratted out World Cup leader Lars van der Haar for not taking a bike during the World Cup Zolder race. For years, officials looked the other way if riders used the pit lane to avoid bottlenecks as long as they dismounted and remounted their bikes. But Niels' camp complained, and the rule was reworded and strictly enforced. From then on, you had to change a bike, or wheels, or fix a wheel, or enter the pit for some other mechanical assistance. It was clear-cut, black and white, letter of the law stuff that you can't misinterpret. Of course, the second line of that rule, after the explicit part, still reads, should a rider take the pit lane for any other reason, the commissaire shall decide, and the decision shall be final. That's the actual language of a rule. The commissaire shall decide, and the decision shall be final. We don't know what they're deciding or what it's based on. They just get to decide and have it final. That's some rich Orwellian text right there. I guess the stop and go is still okay if the commissaires say it's okay? Hey Lars, you're back in the game. Moving on. At one point, after a spate of dangerously hot races, the rule was changed to allow for feeds in the pit. But then Sven Nys took a bottle outside the feed window at Cross Vegas, sparking all kinds of controversy, and the pits were once again for bike exchanges only. Which brings us to Gavere. The double pit is set up at about the halfway point, so Rule 5.1.029, which covers such things, is satisfied. But if we go back to Rule 5.1.027, it tells us the pit areas must be straight, check, located on a part of the course where the speed is not high, subjectively check, exclude gravel and descents. What constitutes a descent? Much like what constitutes a false start, it isn't anywhere in the rules. Even using Justice Stewart's 1964 U.S. Supreme Court threshold test of I know it when I see it, this pit looks to be set up on a descent. But more times than not, rules seem to be mere suggestions when it comes to the UCI, and those suggestions become decisions, and those decisions become final. See 5.1038, and maybe read Animal Farm. Before we even get to an actual bike exchange, the first order of business is picking where your pit crew is going to hand you the bike. If you want the exchange early in the pits or late. It changes from race to race. For Gavere, most of the top riders, those with first dibs, chose to exchange closer to the exit. This meant it was farther to go if you had a mechanical, but less of a momentum loss by changing on the perfectly legal downhill part. Denise Betsema, on the other hand, chose to have her crew closer to the entrance and had a rough go of it. But this was more the result of bad positioning by her crew than where in the pit they set up, or Betsema's exchange technique. You can see the bike holder is still moving as the old bike is handed off. and he doesn't give her a clean line for the handoff. He's almost hiding behind the catcher until the last second. If they had picked a spot farther from the entrance, it would have afforded more time to be set and ready, and not playing peekaboo with your rider also helps. If you compare Betsema's crew to Lucinda Brand's, you can see where Brand gets a nice look at her clean bike and is able to make the transition seamlessly. Now, speaking of technique, let's compare the two racers at the top of the men's field, Tom Pidcock and Mathieu van der Poel. Pidcock takes more steps off the bike than most. He dismounts and hands off bike 1 in about 3 steps and takes 4 more steps before remounting bike 2. It certainly looks unorthodox. Compare that to Van der Poel, who completes the exchange in about 2 steps less. There is no discernible difference in speed between the two, and the height of each rider may determine the number of steps. But the takeaway for the home viewer is not how many steps are taken, or to steal from Moneyball if it doesn't look right, but how smooth the sequence is. It's more about maintaining momentum and conserving energy than about one tried and true technique, or being worried about looking like Kenta Colvin. On many tracks, the decision to change bikes comes down to the difference between time lost on the exchange versus time gained with a clean bike. At Havre, that equation was negated, because as you can see, for both Pidcock and Van der Poel, the time it took to cover the pit was the same whether you changed the bike or not. Interestingly, Pidcock chose to change bikes predominantly on pit 1, the pit entrance earliest in the lap, and Van der Poel mostly used pit 2, the pit entrance on the other side that came near the end of the lap. To me, it looked like Pidcock made the better choice of pits because the exit from the pit set up the rider for a much better angle into the off-camber. You can see how Pidcock is able to accelerate into the section and keep both shoes clipped in, where Van der Poel, after taking the more severe non-pit lane turn, has to dab on almost every lap. While I noted that Pidcock mostly used pit 1 and used that to his advantage, on lap 6, he pitted twice, at pit 1 and then again at pit 2. The second pit on that same lap demonstrates why most pros at the front of elite races bring 3 bikes to a race instead of just 2. Pidcock is pitting for a second time around 3 minutes after the first time, the time it takes to get from pit 1 to pit 2. As we look at the long line of bikes and mechanics waiting for a power washer, you can see how there's no way a second bike is getting back to the pit box in time for an exchange. If Pidcock is Belgian, maybe his guy can work his way up the line a bit, but a Brit? Most likely not happening. The other consequence of the long line is that Pidcock's second crew member is not available to catch the dirty bike at pit 2. This leads Tom to discard his bike on the ground before grabbing the clean bike. And it's a good thing that nobody was behind him, or he would have to get some advice from Lucinda Brand on where to send the fine to the UCI. In the end, while the bike exchanges may not have been the difference in the race, Pidcock's flawless technique early in the season, in the pits and out of it, proved to be the difference. His crew played its part in dialing in tire pressure much more effectively than Van der Poel's camp. Pidcock is dialed, while Van der Poel is searching throughout the race for the right tire pressure to grip the challenging terrain. That the pits really didn't play a huge role isn't necessarily the conclusion I thought I was going to land on when I started breaking down the race, but that makes it all the better, because I still learned something, and I hope you did too. Are there any other takeaways from the Havre pits you may have had? Well, let me know down in the comments below. And please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share. If you'd like even more cyclocross coverage, sign up for the CX Hairs Bulletin. The link, that's in the show notes. Until next time, cyclocross friends.